not being mind.
Oh yeah.
What are they then if they're not mind? They're not form and not mind.
So yeah, let's grab my bag.
And you said something about an 8 as well, 8 sense as well.
Yeah, 8 consciousnesses.
Yeah,
That's
8
the
consciousnesses.
we've got.
I'll fill it out.
Okay. Got a horrible big screen, blue
I meant
screen.
to do questions after lunch session, I forgot. It doesn't matter. There's only a few of us, so we just ask when you want to ask.
Okay.
In terms of, Tim, first of all, the aggregates.
It says it cannot record.
So 5 aggregates,
Yeah.
obviously. Form,
Yeah.
material stuff. Feeling is one of the mental factors.
Yeah.
Discrimination, another one of
Read
the mental
that?
factors.
HDD full.
Consciousness, everything else.
Yeah.
The main consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
The main consciousness.
Right. Yeah.
So all the other mental factors fit into compositional factors.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But then what else you find in compositional factors are things like the impermanence of the mind, the impermanence of the body,
Right.
because they're part of us, aren't they? The fact that the body is a product,
Yeah.
the fact that the body is impermanent, the concepts within the mind, anything which is a part of us, which not goes into those other things. So in terms of non-mental things, if you want to, then impermanence, obviously, of the mind,
Yeah.
impermanence of the body, those are part of us.
The emptiness of the body was what would that go in there?
What's that?
And the emptiness of the body would that go
Emptiness
in?
of the body would be in there, yep, that's right, yep. So all those things which they're not mind, obviously, so all of those
Yeah.
type of things. So all the abstract, the fact
Right.
that the body is a product,
Yeah.
the fact that the body is changing moment to moment, the same as it being permanent. So those are all compositional factors.
Right.
So we generally talk about associated compositional factors and non-associated compositional factors.
Right.
So generally, although we talk about the 5 aggregates being what make up a person,
Yeah.
in reality, everything is one of the 5 aggregates.
Right.
Everything which exists is one of the 5
Yeah.
aggregates.
Right.
So yeah, actually you can divide all phenomena into
Yeah.
the 5 aggregates.
Right.
In fact, the Buddha says in many sutras, all that exists, there is nothing other than the 5 aggregates.
Right.
Because if you think about it, everything which exists is it's either a mind,
Yeah.
or a form,
Yeah.
or it's an abstract concept, such as impermanence,
Yeah.
or emptiness, or products.
And then non-associated.
And they're non-associated compositional factors,
Yeah.
but if you divide them into associated and non-associated
Yeah.
compositional factors, then associated compositional factors are ones which are associated with a person,
Right.
whereas non-associated are not.
Right.
But in general, we use the term non-associated for all.
Right.
But if you want to delineate them, if you want to distinguish them, then
Yeah. Yeah. Is something like a generality that I presume that would go in there.
that would be
Yeah. And is somebody's made generality of table. If I have a generality of table, that's presumably my generality that I've created in my mind, and not necessarily the same as somebody else's generality of the table.
both. There's the meaning, well, we're coming to that when we do conceptual, non-conceptual, but the meaning generality of a table in your mind is your generality
Yeah.
of a table.
Mm-hmm.
However, we can talk about the generality table in an abstract way as it is for everybody.
Right.
So, table is the generality for every individual instance of a table.
Right.
So these are all instances of tables.
Yeah.
But there is a generality which encompasses them all.
A bit like
That's not your generality or my generality. That's just the generality of a table.
that's like a platonic form type sort of thing.
It wouldn't be. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so in a sense, it's a concept, and the concept you have it and the concept I have it are different concepts. There are individual concepts.
Yeah.
However, there is a general concept which encompasses them all.
Right. Okay.
And that will be a generality which is a generality which is a generality for us all, but not your individual generality, your mind's individual generality.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
And then in terms of 8 consciousnesses,
Yeah.
you've got the 6, and this is for the mostly, although it's not exclusively to mind-only school, because some of the other Tibetan traditions talk about the same thing for the higher Madhyamaka schools as well. But you've got the 6 consciousnesses, as we've talked about, and then you've got the mind kunchi, or the mind basis of all, which is where all the karma is imprinted. And in fact it's also related to the clear light mind here. And then you've got what's called an afflictive consciousness. And an afflicted consciousness is basically, its only purpose is to look at the mind and conceive of it as a self. So it's the basis of self-grasping. It's basis of ignorance, basically. So the reason why they give this in terms of from a mind only, or as I say, in some of the other Tibetan traditions they extend this terminology to Madhyamaka as well. The reason why they give it is that by nature the mind isn't tainted by defilements. Yeah, so we've said when we're talking about the clear light of mind, that the clear light of mind isn't defiled. There's no delusions on the clear light of mind. Why are there no delusions? Because there's no self-grasping. There's no concept of subject and object in the clear light mind. So then, for mind only, and also these other Tibetan traditions, then the question comes up: well, if there's no inherent, or for want of a better word, there's no sort of natural self and object-subject distinction from the basis of the clear light, why do we have self-grasping? Why do we see things as inherently existent? And so they come up with a solution to that problem. They come up with this afflicted consciousness. And an afflicted consciousness is basically just, all it is there's not much to it really. It's sort of a weird thing to even think about it. It's just this part of the mind, of the consciousness, which simply looks at you, yourself, your body, and your mind, and sees it as truly existent, or sees a self in there. And therefore it's afflicted, and therefore it's the basis of all afflictions. So it's always wrong. It's always a wrong consciousness. It's by nature a wrong consciousness, and it looks at what is not the self. I can't remember the exact definition for it, but the definition is something like a mind which looks at what is not self and sees it as a self. So that's the 8th consciousness for mind-only schools. But as I say, it does come into other Tibetan traditions a little bit. In the Mappa and Kagyu tradition, they talk about mind bases of all, even from the Madhyamaka point of view. And in fact, you will find in Madhyamaka writings mentions of the mind bases of all, even though it's not, even though it's generally a mind-only point of view.
I've seen Trengpa Rinpoche have 8 consciousnesses.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Now, and that's that's what they call. Really, we'll get on, but that's what they call the in those traditions. And well, I suppose I don't know if they call it in those traditions, but certainly our tradition, looking at those traditions, they call it the mixture of mind only and Madhyamaka, or the mind only and Pasang. It's the joint position.
Right.
I can't remember the actual wording they use. I can't remember actually, but the meaning is it's a mix of mind only and Pasankika. So it's both positions, because a lot of the non-Gelug traditions will talk about mind bases of all. They'll talk about we won't get into this because it gets really complicated, but other emptiness. You've heard the term?
Yes.
Other emptiness.
Shentong.
Yeah. So they'll talk about other emptiness, and they'll say that that's the final view.
Yeah.
And they'll say that's the Pasanga view, but it's also the mind-only view.
Right. Yeah.
So it becomes a combination of those two views.
Yeah.
But of course, in Gelugpa we don't say that.
Yeah. Strictly Ramtong.
Shentong. But actually, His Holiness explains it.
Yeah.
And again, we're going off the subject here, but His Holiness explains it. He resolves it. He explains how Shentong and Ramtong are not actually contradictory. How you can have both views actually.
Yeah, it's by Trengpa Rinpoche, which I'm not aware of, apparently, that according to the blurb at the back, it says they're not contradictory ultimately. One to read.
They are on the face of it, but
yeah.
but it's Homeless explains very clearly how they're not.
Where is that? Where is that in the book?
Oh, for you, I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know of any English translation books where he talks about it. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. Look it up. I'm sure you can find it.
Okay.
Google it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let's move on. So the second type of division, therefore, of mind is into conceptual and non-conceptual consciousnesses. And as I said before, this is really the most important one to understand, and the most important one to really be clear as to what is the difference in these two things. As I've said here, the difference in the two is defined by whether they see the object through the medium of a sound or meaning generality, or both. Now, what does that mean? It means that for a non-conceptual consciousness, and this is why for non-conceptual consciousness, it basically sees what's there. You don't know the impermanence of the microphone, do you? When you're looking at a microphone, you don't, unless you realise the impermanence, you don't see the impermanence of the microphone. But because the impermanence of the microphone is there within the microphone, it appears to your eye consciousness. So, in other words, for non-conceptual consciousness, there's no factor or no intervening image in between what's there and what you're seeing.
Can they be mistaken?
I can be wrong.
Yeah.
And have I mentioned Roman? I have the next one mistaken and non-mistaken. Let's get to that. Hang on. So that's a non-conceptual consciousness. Okay. Now, non-conceptual consciousness doesn't have to be just a sense consciousness. Obviously, the first initial consciousness, which are non-conceptual, are the sense consciousnesses. So all your five senses interact with objects directly. There's no medium, there's no image involved there. It's just what's there you see. Again, you don't necessarily know everything that's appearing, but everything that's there appears. Like a mirror. If a microphone appears into a mirror, everything that is in the microphone is appearing to the mirror. The mirror doesn't know anything. It can't sort of distinguish that there's a microphone. It doesn't distinguish anything about the object. But with the mind, at least we normally distinguish the object, whether it's a microphone or whatever. But we don't also know or recognise that the object is changing moment to moment, or it's impermanent, or it's a product, or all these other things. And we might know it's a microphone, we might know it's black, and so forth. So those are non-conceptual. So.
Is this also translated as direct perception, or is that something
Not
completely
direct perception, non-conceptual and direct perception will be the same thing, yes. Yeah.
Is this applying to the first moment of consciousness?
No, necessarily, no.
That's different, is it? Yeah.
That's different again.
It's always more complicated than you think.
So, however, if it's a non-conceptual consciousness, if it's seeing an object like this, it's not necessarily only a sense consciousness. So it can be sense, but it can also be mental. So, in other words, your mental consciousness, the sixth sense, if you like, can also see things non-conceptually. However, as we were mentioning before, it's very difficult for it to see things non-conceptually. However, it's very difficult, but it's also vitally important, because the only consciousness which is able to remove delusions, even slightly, even start to affect delusions on any sort of permanent or semi-permanent basis, is a non-conceptual consciousness. No other consciousnesses will start to remove delusions at all. It has to be a non-conceptual consciousness. Anything directly is a direct antidote to delusion is a non-conceptual consciousness. So, obviously, the non-conceptual consciousness which are going to remove delusions are not the sense consciousness, because the sense consciousness are just seeing the five things, the five senses. It's a mental non-conceptual consciousness. So we have generally we have loads of mental non-conceptual consciousness, but we're not actually aware of hardly any of them. Generally, we talk about a yogic direct consciousness. So when you, through meditation, when you've reached the union of calm abiding and special insight, then you get what's called a yogic direct consciousness, and that's non-conceptual. And that's the most powerful mind to get. That's the one you want to get in order to start to remove delusions. You also have non-conceptual mental consciousness, which is too small to be noticed. And what that is that when you're looking at something, and you look at the microphone for 5 moments or whatever, and then you start thinking about it, in between your eyesight and the thought, well, the thought is obviously conceptual, it's not non-conceptual, but in between the two there's the briefest moment of what we call mental direct perception. It has to be there, because otherwise how would you get from the sense consciousness to the mental consciousness? There has to be a transition between the two. So there's a tiny moment where the object which is known by the sense consciousness is also known by the mental direct perception, direct consciousness, or non-conceptual consciousness. But that moment is so small that we never notice it. So we don't know we have it. So in fact there are many non-conceptual mental consciousnesses. There is, but what we don't know any of those smallest moment ones. Most of us, or some of you might have, but most of us don't have yogic direct consciousness, not yet. And the other type of non-conceptual mental non-conceptual consciousness are things like clairvoyance, dream. What about dream? There are two opposing views on whether dream is non-conceptual or conceptual. Do you think it's conceptual or non-conceptual? Generally, there's no 100% conclusion either way. It can be conceptual. Some people say it's conceptual, some people say it's non-conceptual.
Feels more conceptual to me, because your mind's creating it rather than directly perceiving something.
Well, whether your mind creates it or not is not really the point. Your mind can create something and can still be non-conceptual. Mm-hmm. But yes, I see what you mean in terms of probably.
I suppose you engage with your dream as if it's real and you are dreaming. So
What's that?
kind of engage with your dreams as if they're real when you're dreaming.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go on to what we mean by conceptual, and then it'll be maybe more clear to see what there is or not. Now, if those are non-conceptual, they're seeing what's there. That's the essence of them, is they're seeing what's out there. They're not testing. A conceptual consciousness, the difference between a conceptual one and a non-conceptual one, is conceptual consciousness is not seeing what's there, it's seeing an image of what's there. So we talk about this as being a meaning generality, or I've said here a sound or a meaning generality. And so what happens with conceptual consciousness, as is always the case with the conceptual consciousness, is that the object is known, whether it be through the senses or through your thinking or through your remembering or whatever else. The object is known, and you think you're thinking about a phone or a microphone or whatever you're thinking about. You think that you're thinking about the object, but what you're aware of, or what's appearing to your consciousness, is an image of that object rather than the object itself. So this is where the whole basis of delusions arising from conceptual consciousness comes. Delusions, ignorance and delusions arise. Do you remember we were talking about the clear light mind, and how that when you die, when you go to sleep, or on those different occasions, the clear light mind comes up, and on the clear light mind there's no delusion. Then the clear light mind arises, conceptions begin to arise. As soon as conceptions begin to arise, so when you're reborn into the bardo, or you wake up, or whatever situation it is where your mind is coming back into life, as it were, or into a grosser form, you begin to conceive of things. And as you conceive of things, you differentiate between yourself and others. You create a self, and therefore an objective world and a subjective knower of that world. And as you do that, the things you see, the whole nature of conception is that the things you think about and the things you see are not the things out there. You think they are, which is the big mistake we all make on our conceptual consciousness. You think they are the things out there, but they're not. They're an image of those things. So with your conceptual consciousness, you never actually directly see anything or know anything. you see it through what we call a meaning generality. Now, meaning generality is basically, we define a meaning generality as being that thing which looks like, so the meaning generality of a phone would be something like that thing which looks like a phone but is not a phone. It's the image of a phone. So where we go wrong with conceptual consciousness, and why we say that conceptual consciousness are always mistaken, although they may not be wrong, they're always mistaken, is that you think you're thinking about a phone, I'm thinking about my phone, when it's not your phone you're thinking about. It's the image of your phone. Which is why conceptual consciousness are creating the world.
It just fills in the gaps, doesn't it? Because there's so much data out there for the brain to process it. I think it uses generalities as a shortcut to filling gaps to stop you having to process it all so quickly.
I'm sure there's something in that as well, but it's much more than that. Basically, your conceptual consciousness is taking the world, and say when you come out of sleep or whatever else, your mind, your clear light mind, which is non-dual. It doesn't separate the world in you. It sees everything as being non-dualistic, in a non-dualistic way. As soon as you start to see things dualistically, the mind creates this world. It creates chairs and tables and phones and things like that. And it believes that those tables and chairs and phones are all things which are out there in the world objectively. And therefore, because it believes they're objectively out there, as we said before, it gets attracted.
Yeah.
But you, when you say did you say whether they're conceptual or not? Or?
Yeah, I was thinking which level of the mind you're dreaming with, because you presume, well, I can't imagine the clear light mind.
It's a mental consciousness, but it's not the clear light consciousness.
But it's below the
it's below the gross, very gross level
right.
consciousness. Yeah, it's not the clear light consciousness.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point here is that conceptual consciousness, and this is so important to Dharma practice. I mean, it's the essence of it in a way of Dharma practice. What you're trying to do is see things as they are, rather than as you conceive them to be, or as you perceive them to be, as you wrongly perceive them to be. Yeah. It's the whole basis of anger and attachment, seeing things wrongly. It's why anger is seeing, like I was saying before, I'm always talking about the 90%. The object you're seeing with anger is 90% what your own conception. Your own perception is not the object out there. That's what your conceptual mind's doing. It's creating a world. It's creating out of images. It's thinking that those images are what you're actually seeing. And therefore attachment and aversion and all those things arise due to the base. So a conceptual mind sees things through the medium of that image. And therefore a conceptual mind is always mistaken, because it always thinks that the object it's knowing or understanding is the object out there, when it isn't. It never is. There's always an image of that object. So, again, conceptual minds will always be mental, won't they? It'll always be a mental consciousness, or it'll be a sense consciousness. And it knows, I talked about two things here, through the medium of a sound or a medium generality. Now, the difference between these two, and this is not too important really, but it's good just to know. A sound generality will be when you hear a word. I know Buddha is a good example of a sound generality. When we hear the word Buddha, and especially if you're, or actually not just if you're new, it doesn't matter how long you've been, until you get realizations, you don't really know what a Buddha is, do you? You have an idea what a Buddha is, but you don't really know what a Buddha is. And you don't really know what a Buddha is until you're probably on the path of seeing, I'd imagine. But you have an image of what you think the Buddha is. And that image obviously isn't a Buddha. And it probably doesn't correspond to what a Buddha is very much at all. So it's just on the basis of the word, without knowing the meaning, it's a sound generality. Yes, you hear the word Buddha, someone tells you what a Buddha is, but you don't really know what it is. You just hazard a guess. Oh, Buddha, that sounds like that. That would be a sound generality. A meaning generality would be where you have an object such as a table, and a young child is a good example. Something you use regularly, every day. You know what it is. You know what it does. It holds things. You put stuff on it, but you haven't heard the word yet. Nobody's told you that it's called table. So that would be an example of a meaning generality without the sound generality. You've got a meaning generality of table, but you don't have the sound generality. The majority of our conceptual consciousness are a mixture of both. Most of our conceptual consciousness, like tables, we know the word and we also know what it does. So it's a mixture of a sound and a meaning generality. But there's a lot of debate when you get into this bit about whether there can actually be such a thing as a sound generality, as you can imagine. Because if a sound generality, you think about it, the sound generality of a Buddha, is it the sound generality of Buddha? What's the connection with Buddha? None,
No,
actually.
just
It's just a sound.
yeah.
So why is it the sound generality of a Buddha? Could be a sound generality of a table.
That particular sound, there's no connection between that, is there? And the
Not
actual
necessarily, no. But
object.
anyway, we won't get into all that.
Yeah.
There's debate about that.
Yeah.
So, from the point of view of practice, therefore, this distinction between conceptual and non-conceptual consciousness is really important, because obviously where the delusion, not only where delusions arise, they arise in conceptual consciousness, but why do they arise? Because of this mistake which the conceptual consciousness is making. Because it's thinking that the image it has of a certain object is the object itself. So you have an image of a person who's harmed you. That image becomes, as anger is, it becomes totally distorted with your mental factor of anger, and blows that person up to be completely bad and wrong, and therefore the anger fuels itself like that. All done in conceptual consciousness, obviously. Now, from that point of view, therefore, you will find that there are certain Buddhist schools as well who say that therefore conceptions are always wrong. But what you're trying to do in terms of becoming enlightened is to remove conceptions. And in fact, the big debate in Tibet between the Chinese, what's his name?
Hoshen Mahayana.
Yeah, what's he called?
Hoshen
Hoshen,
Mahayana.
that's right. Which happened at
Samye.
was about this. And this still exists today within Zen traditions and other traditions of Buddhism, that this, how do we become a Buddha? By just stopping your conceptions. Because conceptions are always wrong. They're not off the mark totally, because conceptions are always wrong. Conceptions are always mistaken. Anything, it's so useful in terms of daily practice, and just on the basis of meditating and having a degree of awareness. When you go into a situation and you become attached, or you become angry, or you become jealous, or you become yes, there are always antidotes to those things. But really, the simplest way to deal with delusions is just to understand that they're wrong. They're fabricating reality. They're making the whole thing up. And as soon as you do that, it's actually quite easy to stop them. I remember when I was in the monastery, there was an older monk who used to just talk about these things, and if me or one of the other monks you got angry or you got attached to something, or he would just say, just drop the attachment, just drop it, because it's mistake. It's you making it up in your mind. So just drop, and you can do that actually. We don't, but you can if you're just aware that your attachment is a very good one to do. If your attachment towards an object, towards a person, then as long as you allow that feeling of attachment to be there in your mind, you can't let go. You can't let go of the object. You have to have it. You have to get yourself to that object. But if you just go to your mind, so okay, lose the attachment, stop the attachment, lose the attachment, then suddenly it's gone. Then suddenly that clinging or that stickiness or that desire of having that object just disappears. It just goes. Because it's just a switch. It's just a switch in your mind, and it's actually very much easier than you imagine to just turn it off. I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to. That conception is based on a mistake. It's based on a fabrication. It's an illusion of my mind. I just won't have that. And you can just turn it off. We don't, but you can. You can just simply turn it off. So, from a practical point of view, understanding that conceptions, and then when you go into a situation where not only from your own point of view, but from the point of view of generating compassion to others, and we always talk about, don't we, like that if someone's angry towards you, or someone's insulting you, or someone's doing something bad to you, you shouldn't get angry back. You should actually be compassionate towards them because they're suffering in their own minds. All correct, and all very nice, and all right, and everything. But when you come into the actual situation, often it just doesn't work, does it? You're just not there with it, and you just get angry as you always do, and then like half an hour or maybe a day or two later you think, oh no, I'm a Buddhist, I shouldn't have done that. I should have felt compassion towards them. I shouldn't have been angry with them. But if you can bring this understanding into your situation, then not only do you understand that when I get angry or when I get attached to something, it's a mistake in my mind. It's me taking the image of something to be the actual thing, which is not. That's very helpful to remove your own delusions. But in the other person's mind as well, if you can relate to the fact, the reason why they're doing what they're doing to me is because they had a bad morning, or because they argued with their husband or wife, or they've just been in another situation. It's their mistaken mind in their mind that's making them do it. And if you can do that, I'm not saying I do this all the time, but I have experience doing it, and it does work. Is you look at the situation and say, well, it's their mental fabrication, their image in their mind, which is making them do whatever they're doing, insulting you or hitting you or whatever it may be, or causing you a problem, cutting you up on the road or whatever. I tell you, there was I have a really good example of this, which happened quite recently to me. And this is all to do with, the orange. So as I drove through the lights, his foot went onto the road. Now this guy, he was in my local town. I knew who he was, and he's a mentally handicapped guy. He comes. I've seen him around before. He's well known in the town, to be. But he's sick. He's not well. He's mentally handicapped. So what happened was, I went through these lights. I obviously just continued. He stepped onto, and he lost it completely. He just went mad, because he felt that I'd gone through the lights while he was trying to cross. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that actually, but that's what he felt, and he felt that because he was mentally handicapped, because his mind was not. So as I drove along, he went into the middle of the road and just started screaming and shouting and going like this, mm-hmm. holding up all the traffic. In the middle of this one-way system, holding up the whole traffic, which of course for me, if it had been a normal person, I would have got, well, why are you doing that? I didn't do anything wrong, and now you're holding up all the traffic and making me look like embarrassing everybody by standing in the middle of the road and going like this. But because he was a mentally handicapped person, that feeling didn't arise in my mind. It didn't come for 1 second. In fact, when I looked in my wing mirror, and it went on for about, not quite half a mile, but getting towards half a mile, I could still see him in my wing mirror about half a mile. He was still going like this. And the longer I drove on, the more compassion arose in my mind, rather than anger, because I knew he was a mentally handicapped person. That's why. It was very easy to do, because I knew he wasn't reacting normally. He wasn't doing things the way a normal person was. So if you mind, then yeah, you can say, well, you should have known better. You looked at it, you saw it with your eyes, you saw what was there. Now, we do say within Pasangika actually that even sense consciousnesses see things as truly existent, due to the situation of seeing things as inherently existent. Even our eyes see things as truly existent. So, leaving that aside, certainly with our mental consciousness, with our conceptual minds, we don't see what's there. We see the image, our mind's image. And our mind's image of what's there is a combination of what's out there, and it's a combination of our previous experiences with a particular object, a phone or a microphone, whatever it is, and it's a combination of how you felt when you got out of bed this morning, and whether you've just had an argument with your partner or not, and whether you've just someone else has just insulted you or not. It's a combination of all those things. It's affected by all those things. So when you deal with things conceptually, you're dealing with them in the mix of all that stuff. And so is everybody else when they do that. So you can't expect it to be mentally normal, because it never is. So if you can understand that, you can understand this difference between conceptual and non-conceptual consciousnesses, it just helps to see that from your own mind, from your own practice point of view, that you're always going wrong on the level of concepts, and that other people are always going wrong as well. The person who
at the same time.
you can, yeah.
So does that mean that you're seeing, conceptually and non-conceptually with those two minds?
You can see it with your conceptual mind and your non-conceptual mind at the same time, because each of those minds are arising due to a different uncommon
Right.
empowering condition. So the eye consciousness is seeing it due to the sense power, and the
Right.
mental consciousness. But you couldn't see with the mental consciousness, which is seeing the object at the same time as the eye consciousness. They're not the same object actually.
Like someone's going to mean generality.
But also the one which is the conceptual consciousness is a moment later. So the table what you're seeing with your eye consciousness now is the table, well in fact even the table you're seeing now is a little bit before the one you're actually seeing. You see what I mean? It's actually arising before you see it. But the mental consciousness is seeing an earlier table.
Right, yeah.
So in other words, the eye consciousness seeing the table, the mental consciousness thinking about the table is thinking about a table which was one moment before that. So it's actually a different object from that point of view.
Okay.
But it's but you can certainly see with each of your 6 consciousnesses, you can see simultaneously with all 6. It's theoretically possible. It's very difficult, but
Right.
you can theoretically see with all 6. But yeah, so as long as the uncommon and parent condition is different, you can't have 2 eye consciousness at the same time. You can't see that, and you can't have 2 of those at the same time, but you can have 2 an eye consciousness and a mental consciousness at the same, of the same object, yeah. Although when you really get down to it, it's not actually the same object, it's a slightly different object.
Right.
It's the same object in generality, but it's not a it's really, we don't live in, that's not because we don't live in the moment, do we? We live in our conceptual minds. We don't live in. I think that's probably, if you're totally there and mindfully, then you are living more in your non-conceptual consciousness, aren't you? You're there living with things as they are and as they happen right now. But most of the time, we are living in our conceptual, absolutely, completely. Yeah.
Like, because I see the impermanence of the table. Do I not with my direct consciousness?
You don't see it. It appears to you.
Appears.
So you don't actually see it. Everything which is out there you see with your eyesight, but you don't know. So we talk about it's getting a bit more complicated to do this. So basically, a mind has different objects. So really, there are 2 main objects to a mind. And this is not a full list of what appears to a mind, but this is the easiest way to understand it. There are 2 main objects which appear. There's an appearing object, and there's the object which is known by the mind. 2 things. We call them appearing object, and you probably heard the terms appearing object and object of engagement. 2 objects. Now, with a sense consciousness, with a non-conceptual consciousness, the appearing object consists of everything which is out there. Now, it's easy to understand from the sort of technical point of view in that basically whatever is the object of a sense consciousness is impermanent. Everything which is impermanent is an object of a sense consciousness. So when you look at a table, the impermanence of the table, the colour of the table being a black, all those things appear to that consciousness. Because whatever is out there appears. It's as simple as that.
Right.
Whatever it may be is out there. But the mind, unless it's realised emptiness or impermanence, doesn't know the impermanence. It appears to it, so it's its appearing object, but it's not its object of engagement. The object of engagement is only the table, because that's all you know with the eye consciousness. When you get to the conceptual consciousness, then the table's appearing, but it's appearing through the medium of the generalised image. So it's not the table; it's the generalised image of the table. So when you get to a conceptual consciousness, the appearing object is the meaning generality of the table, but the object of engagement is the table as well itself, which is why it's not wrong. It's mistaken, and it comes in the next one we do here. It's not wrong because it's not wrong about it being a table, but what it is it's mistaken, and that's the same with all conceptual consciousness. They're always mistaken, but they're not necessarily wrong. And this is another actually very important qualification here between in conceptual consciousnesses. In general, this comes really into the next thing. We'll briefly touch on it. In general, all conceptual minds are mistaken. Right? Why are they mistaken? Why are conceptual minds mistaken?
Because they assume an inherent reality that's not there.
Not necessarily inherent, but why are they?
Because they're relying on the image and not
Exactly, because they're seeing the image and thinking that the image of the object is the actual object. So they're mistaken, yeah? They're always mistaken. But they're not necessarily wrong, because although they see the image, so if you see the image of a phone, you're thinking about your phone, you're not wrong that you're thinking about, because it is your phone, but you're mistaken because you think that the thing you're thinking about is your phone, but it's not. It's the image of the phone.
So if I see a coil snake rope as a coil snake, that is a wrong consciousness. If I see the rope as a rope, it's the mistaken consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point being here that with your conceptual consciousness, they're always mistaken.
Yeah.
Whether it's seeing a rope or a snake or a phone or a table, they're always mistaken because they're always seeing things through the medium of an image. And things aren't images, things are things.
Yeah.
So they're always mistaken. Now when you get to, if you're seeing it wrong, not only are you wrong about what's appearing to you, and the appearing is the object, is the image, yeah? The image of the object appearing to you. If you're not only wrong about the image of the thing, but you're actually wrong about what the thing is, then you're mistaken and you're wrong. So if you're seeing the table as a, what was it?
Lion.
Line. Yeah.
If you see the table as a lion, then not only with your thinking, not with your eye, with your mental consciousness, with your conceptual mind, you see the table as a lion, you're not only mistaken, because it's an image of a lion you're seeing, isn't it? It's the image of a lion, not a lion.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, it's mistaken. And not only is it mistaken, but it's wrong, because not only are you wrong about the fact that it's an image, not the real thing, but it's not even the real thing. It's a lion. So it's a table, not a lion. Now, bring that over, and this is where it becomes important practically, and for daily practice. Bring that over to delusions, and delusions are conceptual, obviously, but not only are they conceptual, they're also wrong. They're not only mistaken consciousnesses, they're wrong consciousnesses. So yes, they're seeing things through the medium of an image, but that doesn't mean it's wrong, does it? You can see something through the medium of illusion, it still is that thing. But the point about delusions, negative emotions, is that not only are they mistaken, not only are they seeing a table through the medium of a table, but they're seeing a table as a lion. Delusions are always doing that. When you're angry, you're not just seeing someone through an image, you are seeing them through an image, but your image is totally off the wall. Your image is complete nonsense. It's totally projected and created the image of something which is not right. So when you're attached to something and you see it as being inherently beautiful, and inherently, not a good word to use because it's confusing, but intrinsically beautiful or attractive, that object doesn't have those qualities. When you're seeing something that you're angry towards, and you're seeing that object or person as being intrinsically bad or wrong, not only is it mistaken, but it's wrong. It's seeing the image is totally off the wall, it's totally wrong. So again, practically speaking, that means that if you're in a day-to-day practice, when anger arises, or when other people are angry towards you, and again goes back to the example of the mentally handicapped person, you can't get angry towards a mentally handicapped person because you know it's not right. Well, he's completely fabricating the whole thing. His mental state is creating his world, which is not real. It's a mental fabrication. But the same is true of all of us. We all totally create our worlds. We create our reality. We create, and most of the time, even when we're not wrong about our reality, we're mistaken about it. And going back to what we were saying about the clear light mind before, what is the clear light mind? There's no mistake in the clear light mind, but out of the clear light mind, suddenly we start to think of a self. And then when we think of a self, we start to distinguish between object and subject. We make things dualistic. And therefore we're creating our world. We're creating our experience. Our mind creates everything. So even when we're not wrong about our world, but the table, yes, a table is a table, a phone is a phone, and a mile is these are what they are, but they're still mentally created. From the point of view that they appear to be out there objectively, not me. They're different from me. That's a creation. That's a mental creation. So we're always mistaken. We're always mistaken about the world around us. But not only are we mistaken, when we generate negative emotions, anger and attachment and so forth, we're not just mistaken. We're totally off. We're completely out of picture. We're seeing things which are just not there. And on the basis of seeing something which is not there, we get angry. or anger is on the basis of that total fabrication of reality. Then we become angry, or become attached, or become jealous, or become proud. So I've always thought that in a sense, that's the most hopeful thing about delusions, is that they're completely wrong. They're completely seeing the world wrongly. So there will always be conceptual, there will always be mistaken, but if it's a positive, and again, if you take that the other side of that, of course, and which is the inspiring side of that, the other side of that is that positive emotions are not doing that. Positive and love, compassion and so forth, they're mistaken, like any conceptual mind is. They're still seeing things through the medium of an image, so they're still mistaken, but they're not wrong. They're not imputing or projecting things onto an object which is not there. When you feel love or compassion towards, when you feel compassion towards another living being, other beings want to be happy. They want to not suffer. That's not wrong. You don't have to put stuff on them. You might do, and it can be wrong, but generally, to be compassionate towards others, you don't need to impute suffering onto others. Suffering's already there on others. And when you feel a wish to relieve that suffering, that's not a wrong consciousness. It's a correct consciousness. It's mistaken still, but it's not wrong. Which again is the whole base. What we call choiceless awareness, in terms of just meditating on the mind and just not being involved in any senses or any thoughts or any emotions like that. Let's do a different type of meditation on the mind now. This is more where we is the one coming back, or should we?
I think she's coming back.
Yeah.
I'll to explain it.
Are there lots of different ways that we're wrong about our object then? Because I was thinking my own personal, we've all got our own different samsaric experiences, but it tends to, I've recognised sort of an expectation that, that's disappointed in whatever way. That's my kind of, so there's an exaggeration of my expectations in the world. So obviously you feel, angry when that's not met, or disappointed and have all the delusions from that. But is there kind of like lots of different ways? Is this like
that we're wrong about the object?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Expectations is one of the major things. They say stress is the difference between reality and your expectations, or something like that.
All right. Okay. Well, there we go.
If you drop all your expectations, I think that's great advice.
That's renunciation in a way as well, isn't
it? Drop expectations, just get rid of them. They're just a problem. There was it all comes into that thing of letting go of. It's 8 worldly dharmas, isn't it? You only have expectations because you're involved with the 8 worldly dharmas. If you don't involve yourself with 8 worldly dharmas, there's no expectation. And then it's truly letting go, isn't it? When you don't follow the 8 worldly dharmas, you let go of all that. It was really put nicely by one. There was one monk in India he came from the Chithurst, Chithurst Amravati, the Thai tradition.
Oh right, okay.
He was I always remember so well. He came out of that tradition. They're really strict in that tradition. Like the monks in that tradition are just like Vinaya-wise, they're really strict. But he'd been in that tradition for 10, 15 years or something, and he came and started staying with the Tibetans, and he just like went the other way completely. In fact, he reverted to before he was a monk, he was a hippie, and he was called Stardust, and he reverted back to being called Stardust again. And he used to sort of in that, as some of you know, in that tradition, the monks, you never touch a woman, you don't even touch something which a woman touches. In that tradition, you're just like, it's really, really strict. And he just went totally the other way, and he was hugging everybody. But anyway, he put it really nicely, I thought. And he used to teach in Bodh Gaya in Root Institute for a while, it's many years ago. And he used to say just, because in their tradition you eat from the bowl, you just eat whatever you're given. And in fact, if you're strict, when they all did it usually, you would just put everything into the bowl. So it would be your main dish, and often there'd be ice cream or cake, and you'd all go in the same bowl, mix it all together, and eat it, which was actually quite easy to do because you only ate once a day. So you're so hungry you didn't care anyway. You just but he put it like this in terms of letting go, not following the 8 worldly dharmas, and not having expectations. He said, whatever is on your plate, eat it. He said, whatever's on your plate, just eat it. But no, I think that being involved with 8 early dharmas and following expectations is such a good teaching and such a good lesson on for not just from a Buddhist point of view, but the everyday normal people's stress point of view. You let go of your expectations; they're only going to cause problems. They only cause suffering. So before we did what is known as a choiceless awareness, where you just stay aware of everything that's happening, whether it be a sense, whether it be a noise or a sound or a sight or a thought or emotion. You're just simply aware of those things without being involved with them. Now we're going to do a different type of meditation on the mind, where we're taking the mind or awareness as our object. So it's a focusing meditation rather than an analytical meditation. It's a focusing meditation, and you're taking as the object, rather than your breath or anything else, you're taking the awareness itself. Now it's slightly different from what we did before, because we're not necessarily noticing any of the things around us, but also we're not stopping any of those things. So if you have a thought, if you have an emotion, if you have a sound, you don't have to stop those things. You don't even try and stop them. You let them come, you let them go. But you're trying to stay as the object, single-pointedly if you can, on your awareness. Right? Stand on awareness itself. Now, Sanders talks about doing this as using the eye consciousness. Generally, when you're doing this sort of meditation, you can have your eyes more open than you usually do. And he says that there's this technique of using the space of the eye consciousness. And what you do to identify your mind, think about what we talked about in terms of what's the meaning of mind. It's clear and knowing. So it's like a mirror, it's clear and it knows. And it's like all sorts of ways of describing it, but it's like a clear sky with no clouds in it. The way of identifying that and getting to that, go to your eye consciousness. When you're at your eye consciousness, you'll notice, without looking at anything, don't look at anything, you'll see that there's a space. It's like a space. It's not what you're looking at, it's just a space. That space, and as someone says, is an external indication of an internal reality. Does that make sense? It's an external sign or indication showing you an internal reality. So in other words, the space that you see, when you look at your eye consciousness and you see there's a space, relate that to your mind. That's what your mind is like. Just pure awareness. And use that as your object of your mind, object of your meditation. Focus on that. Focus on that level of mind. And when you're on that level of awareness, don't thoughts come, thoughts go. Obviously, as with any meditation, try not to be involved with those thoughts or sounds or whatever else. But you're not just choicelessly being aware of them. You're actually trying to be aware just of awareness. Right? You're taking awareness as your object and trying to stay with that. That's really, it's very difficult to explain this way of meditating really, but it's just something you have to experience and just try. But the idea is to be meditating and taking the object and trying to focus and stay single-pointedly as much as you can with just awareness. Alright, so let's just try that. Just start by breathing for a minute or two. Whenever you do meditation, including on the mind, it's always good to start with a minute or two of breathing. So just watch the breath going in and breath going out for a minute or so. And then just direct your attention to awareness itself. Just to that clear, mirror-like awareness which underlies everything you hear, or see, or feel. That even comes underneath all the thoughts and emotions. The awareness which is underneath all these things. Just bare awareness itself. Try to get a sense. So we'll continue with the other divisions tomorrow. We're still on the first part of the quote though.
Sorry about all the technical issues today.
What is that?
Sorry about all the technical
I didn't notice.
issues with the mics and the camera. This is actually for the other people, this microphone, so they can pick up the questions.
Ah, okay.
This one is for the guest speaker, so I should go
Okay.
over it tomorrow.
Thank you.